Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Middle of the week. It's a Wednesday, September 17, 2025. Great to be with you on a Wednesday every day here at EWTN's Catholic Connection. And we have much to discuss, so much going on in and around the world. And we are going to start out after the news and the weather. And I want to thank our head of radio, Jack Williams, for connecting with Dr. Janet Smith. She's an old friend of mine, old in the sense of we've known each other for a while. But Jack got on it yesterday after he saw a terrific article that she did on Crisis Magazine regarding the impact of Charlie Kirk's death. And so she's joining us in the first segment this morning. The bottom of the hour, Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. This is based on my EWTN best-selling book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders. We're going to take you to the town of Montecassino, which is in southern Lazio, and is a burial place for Saints Benedict and, of course, his twin sister, Saint Scholastica. And the reason I want to take you there is because I've really been thinking a lot about the beautiful quote that is at the beginning of the Rule of St. Benedict, in which he tells us to listen with the ear of the heart. So I think it's important for us to remember how the saints can teach us so very much. So we'll take you to Montecassino. We'll learn about his whole idea in terms of why he decided to go to Montecassino and why he actually left Subiaco as well after leaving Rome. His whole idea really was to seek solitude and to seek a place to really make sure that he and the monks could connect and continue to reconnect peacefully with the Lord. Listening with the ear of the heart, something we all need to do in this day and age, especially after what we've seen in our country and our world the last few weeks. And speaking of listening with the heart, there's a wonderful article in Alatea from Meg Hunter-Kilmer. Of course, she's a great writer. She also has a new book coming out. And this is about saints who teach us that we can disagree and still be respectful. Now, St. Benedict wasn't in that group, but there are so many saints, there's over 10,000 saints as we know in the one holy Catholic and apostolic faith. And so she does really bring us some very unique saints who were friends despite their differences. So it's a great article. We'll talk about that. And then we will let you know a little bit more about the second hour of the program as we move through. So again, we have Dr. Janet Smith, the impact of Charlie Kirk's death, Shrine and Wonders Wednesday, listening with the ear of the heart, all about St. Benedict and Montecassino. We'll take you there. And then we'll learn some more about the saints who can teach us how we can disagree and still be respectful with one another. What a concept. And that will be with Meg Hunter-Kilmer. So that's our first hour on a Wednesday morning edition of Catholic Connection. Do hope it's going well for you. Weather-wise, the National Weather Service says a coastal storm is continuing to bring bands of heavy rain, gusty winds, minor coastal flooding, and rip currents over the mid-Atlantic region today. Heavy rain showers and thunderstorms are persisting across the plains as well. And they're also saying that possible excessive rainfall could occur over western South Dakota. And then there's a tropical depression, and it's Tropical Depression 7 that's formed in the central Atlantic, and it could become a tropical storm later today. So the weather experts are keeping an eye on that for you as well. Thank you for listening to EWTN. I want to remind you, many stations are in the middle or about to have their fall drives. This morning I was on with wonderful St. Gabriel Radio out of Columbus, Ohio. We had a lot of fun, and just encourage people to support both your local Catholic radio station, of course, and EWTN. And as Mother Angelica always said, and as Father Mitch still reminds us, and he'll be with us tomorrow, you need to keep us between your gas and electric bill. But it's important to support both because we work together to bring you 24/7 great Catholic radio. And the cool thing about having a local station in your market, let's say like St. Gabriel Radio in Columbus, is because you've got this whole idea of subsidiarity, right? You're supporting the local efforts and the local people, because when you're supporting your local Catholic radio station, that is an outlet for everything going on in your diocese. And then you can learn about, let's say, maybe when your bishop is speaking, or maybe the next pro-life event. And it's super important to make sure that if you do have a Catholic radio station in your area, that you support them. And we'd love to have you support us as well, of course. Right now, it's 4 minutes past the hour. It is a Wednesday morning. We've got a lot of news to get to, so let's get through this right now. We're starting with more developments in the story of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Let's take a look at the news. It's a Wednesday morning, September 17th, here on EWTN. Well, the man accused of assassinating Charlie Kirk is being held now without bond in the state of Utah. Tyler Robinson appearing at a virtual hearing in Provo yesterday, where he was informed the state is seeking the death penalty in his case.
We did file just recently, within the last few minutes, a notice of intent to seek the death penalty. That was filed by Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray.
That was State Prosecutor Chad Grunander, the 22-year-old Robinson appearing in a green bulletproof vest and nodding as the judge spoke, never changing his expression as all of the charges against him were read aloud. Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray earlier saying it was his decision alone to seek the death penalty in the case. Utah is one of 5 states that allow execution by firing squad if lethal injection is unavailable. And Mark Mayfield is telling us this morning authorities in Utah, meanwhile, saying a man who was arrested just after Charlie Kirk was assassinated did claim he fired the shot to help the real shooting suspect escape.
The Utah County Sheriff says 71-year-old George Zinn yelled that he was the shooter to allow the actual suspect to flee. Tyler Robinson was arrested late Thursday and has been charged with aggravated murder for the killing of the conservative activist. Robinson apparently acknowledged Zinn's arrest, telling his roommate in a text message that police had grabbed some crazy old dude. Zinn is being held on charges of obstruction of justice and possession of child sex abuse material. I'm Mark Mayfield.
President Trump and Vice President Vance will both deliver remarks at the memorial service for Charlie Kirk this week, and the Hill reports both will speak at Sunday's service at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. Kirk's widow, Erica, will also give remarks along with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Kirk again shot and killed during an event at Utah Valley University a week ago today. And 22-year-old Utah resident Tyler Robinson, as you've heard, has now been charged with his murder. Kate Fisher tells us the State Department says anyone celebrating the assassination of the conservative activist Charlie Kirk will be denied a visa or face having it revoked if they already have one.
Secretary of State Rubio wrote on X that America will not host foreigners who celebrate the death of our fellow citizens, saying a visa means you're a visitor and we're not in the business of inviting people to visit our country who are going to be involved in negative and destructive behaviour. And he said if they're already here, we should be revoking their visa. The Trump administration has already taken the visas off hundreds of foreign students with pro-Palestinian views, which critics argue infringes free speech. Kate Fisher, Washington.
A Texas State University student expelled yesterday after being caught on video acting out conservative activist Kirk's assassination during an on-campus memorial event hosted by a local Turning Point USA chapter. The video, filmed on the University of San Marcos campus Monday, appeared to show the male student with a backpack cursing the crowd, hitting his neck, and pretending he was shot. The man then stood up in front of a statue and said, "Hi, my name is Charlie Kirk," acting out the assassination, falling to the ground, further mocking the death of the 31-year-old father of 2. The governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, calling for the student's expulsion in an X post, and the Texas state president later confirming the student in the video was identified, saying, "I will not tolerate behavior that mocks, trivializes, or promotes violence on our campuses." The individual is no longer a student at Texas State. In other news this morning, Annunciation Catholic school students returning to class this week following the recent deadly mass shooting at the church. School resuming on-campus activities today. There will be support services and a security presence. The shooting happened on August 27th during a back-to-school mass when a 23-year-old is accused of shooting through a window and killing 2 children and wounding 21 students as well as adults. Registered nurses at Ascension St. Agnes Hospital in Baltimore demanding the Catholic hospital chain divest from industries they say violate church values. They held a protest Monday morning citing a nursing union report that claims Ascension invests in companies tied to weapons, gambling, tobacco, and more. The nurses are in contract negotiations and are also calling for better staffing and patient care. An Ascension Health spokesperson telling a local TV station the hospital follows faith-based investment standards and reinvests all earnings into patient care, wages, and services for those in need. President Trump is in the UK for an official state visit. Before leaving, he spoke with reporters on a number of topics, including a deal to save TikTok in the U.S.
I've reached a deal with China. I'm going to speak to President Xi on Friday to confirm everything up. We made a very good trade deal, and I hope good for both countries, but a very different deal than they've made in the past.
He did not provide details, but saying a group of very big companies want to buy TikTok's U.S. operations. Trump was also asked about what he said was another U.S. strike on a Venezuelan drug boat. The Trumps will be taking part in many events this week, including a wreath-laying ceremony at the tomb of Queen Elizabeth II and a banquet at Windsor Castle. The President and First Lady returning to the U.S. tomorrow. FBI Director Kash Patel saying there's no credible information that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked women to anyone besides himself. During a contentious hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday, Patel insisting authorities have released all the information on Epstein that was deemed credible. He went on to say that because the U.S. Attorney in Florida improperly narrowed the scope of an investigation into Epstein's years ago, the FBI files are limited. In the same hearing, Patel and Democrats on the committee shouted at one another over a variety of various subjects and issues. And state terrorism charges against alleged United Healthcare CEO killer Luigi Mangione have been dropped. The 27-year-old learned at his Tuesday court hearing that he's no longer facing the top murder count, but the second-degree murder charges remain. The judge tossed the charges of first-degree murder as an act of terrorism, ruling the charges were legally insufficient. The judge said hearings for Mangione's case to start on December 1st, but a trial date has yet to be determined. Mangione has pleaded not guilty to charges in New York and Pennsylvania, along with federal charges. And Tammy Trujillo tells us OpenAI is announcing a new teen safety feature for ChatGPT.
Now the AI chatbot will include an age prediction system and ID age verification in some countries. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman described the struggles of balancing OpenAI's priorities of freedom and safety in a recent blog post. He shared that the company was working to build a system that would try to sort users into a version of the software for adolescents 13 to 17 and one for adults 18 and older. The company made the announcement hours before a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on the potential harm of AI chatbots was set to start. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
And you may recall during the weather, we were talking about some issues with the weather in terms of some systems in the Atlantic. The National Hurricane Center tracking 2 Atlantic systems, with Gabriel expected to be born in the central tropic Atlantic in the near future.
But currently right now, models look to curve that out north of the islands out there, so no threat here to Florida.
Hurricane specialist Larry Kelly saying a second system just coming off the African coast and a bit south of a dust plume has a low chance of development over the next week. Well, they're currently monitoring the entire region as we shift into late September and October. The Caribbean and Gulf traditionally become the hotbeds for tropical weather development. And Jennifer Pulsoni tells us Academy Award-winning director and actor Robert Redford has passed away.
Born in Santa Monica, California in 1936, Redford won an Oscar in 1981 for directing the film Ordinary People. His acting credits included the movies Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid, All Is Lost and Unfinished Life, The Sting, Spy Game, The Horse Whisperer, among many. He's also credited as the founder of the Sundance Film Festival. Redford died at his home in Utah. He was 89 years old. I'm Jennifer Bolsoni.
It is a Wednesday morning. You are listening to Catholic Connection. It is a production of EWTN. When we come back, continue our conversation about the fallout of the death of conservative leader Charlie Kirk. We'll be joined by Dr. Janet Smith, who wrote a powerful piece for Crisis Magazine, and we'll give you the link to that where you can find it. Our conversation with Janet begins in just about 2 minutes. Thanks for tuning in to EWTN on a Wednesday and every day. We'll be right back. Fifteen minutes past the hour. It is a Wednesday, September 17th. Great to be with you on EWTN's Catholic Connection. I've known Janet Smith a long time for her great work on so many levels. Theology of the Body, of course, retired from Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit. And she's a fantastic moral theologian and a fearless pro-life leader. And I really appreciated her article on Crisis. The website Crisis will give you the link. But Janet, this is such a big story. It has so many legs and so many people from, you mentioned this in your piece on Crisis, from across political spectrums, religious spectrums. People feel like they've just been sucker punched in so many ways. What was your impact when you first heard the news? And thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, I heard he was shot, and I was with a friend. We were going for a walk, and we both of us went and sat at a bench and said a rosary. And I just couldn't believe that Charlie Kirk was going to die. And then, about 15 minutes after we finished the rosary, the announcement was that he had died. And it just takes it out of you. I mean, it's like a family member, and in an odd way worse, because you grieve for yourself when you lose a loved one, and you grieve for your immediate family. But with Charlie, you grieve for the whole world, everybody now, and all these people to come that will never have. I mean, thank God, there are so many videos of Charlie. I mean, I've been, ODing on them for days, and he's just so wonderful. But you just think all the good that he could have done. No, sometimes I think maybe God has more good out of what has happened than if he had lived till 70. He had an impact that's unbelievable, and his death has introduced so many people to him. On my Facebook page, I wrote these things, and people would say I'd never heard of him before. And now I looked up his stuff, and I can't get enough of him. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's happening. People who we had no idea how many people had heard of Charlie Kirk. They said there were something like 15 billion views of his videos. Now, that's not 15 billion, different people. But, there's billions who watch him every time he comes on, and there's others who are becoming introduced to him. So it's an extraordinary thing. I mean, Christ died at 33. God could have kept him alive till 75. But 33 was the right number. And the good that all those apostles and disciples that went out from Christ, and all the young men and young women now who say, I am Charlie Kirk. Mm-hmm. I'm not quiet anymore. I'm going to say, I love Jesus, and I'm going to say it in public. And he was so beautiful. He treated people with such enormous patience. I watched one this morning. A woman shows up with a rainbow shirt, and just advertising all sorts of things about herself. And he just talks to her, and she thinks everything he says. He's trying to impose religion on people, and he shows no. My deepest foundational beliefs are biblical, but I can make a rational case for every one of them. And she's having a hard time, and then he just says, anything else you want to say? I think there's something about Christianity that bothers you. Can you tell us what it is? Oh, okay, well, just know we're going to be praying for you. It was so beautiful, no dismissal, no hatred, just wanting to listen, wanting to understand. Amazing.
Yeah, there's so many things being revealed here, because so many people automatically assume, that with the media give this impression, the culture gives this impression, certain people on the left, that because he was a strong conservative and stood up for marriage and family and life, that he was automatically a hater, right? We get put into that category of a hater, but then they start watching the videos and they listen to something, for example, as you just described, and that's what's changing people, I think, and they're realizing, I've been duped.
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, there's a couple of people who put out public challenges and say, I will give you $1,000, I'll give you $10,000 if you can find one racist statement by Charlie Kirk. And you can't just take an isolated sentence. You have to give the whole context of where that sentence appeared, because often there are things that he was refuting, and people say, well, he said this. And he said, yeah, he said it to refute it. And people have not found one. They have not found one instance where you can say this was, without question, a racist statement when you see the whole context. I mean, he arranged for a black leadership conference in the White House. There are countless videos of black men and women, Asian men and women, kids, punks with, purple hair, who say, I loved Charlie. He listened to me. He cared about me. So people are paying no attention. Again, they don't listen to you, Teresa. All right, they're only listening to mainstream media, which they're not after the truth. They're after smearing people who disagree with them. And I read this morning that Turning Point is going to sue some of these people for defamation.
Good.
And just say,
good.
You see, they have to learn. They have to be accountable for their words.
Right. The good thing, though, in addition to obviously people standing up for what they believe, and as you just said, not just they're saying, basta, enough of this. I'm going to speak, respectfully my beliefs and not be afraid anymore. But I'm sure you saw the stories that are showing now the inquiries for interest in Turning Point USA over 50,000. I think the last number was 54,000 people. I don't know if it's just individuals or college groups, but 54,000 inquiries about Turning Point USA.
Yeah, in a way we can see that he has already revolutionized the young people, and it's just going to get more and more and more because these kids have been sold a bill of goods. And when they run up against Charlie, what they get is a very clear counter argument that they've never heard. And again, I just see him. I love college students. I taught for 40 some years, and just realizing those brains need to be activated. And it's just so exciting when you teach them to question something, and then they question it, and they see that you can question things, and they know how to think about things, and they know how to evaluate an argument and what kind of facts matter and what is nonsense. You could just see that. He's as I said, he's a modern day Socrates, and most of Socrates' exchanges with young men, the young men didn't change their mind right in front of him. They just got more stubborn and more stubborn and more stubborn. Mm-hmm. But everybody around him, their eyes are opening up and saying, "Oh, this guy's an idiot. He won't concede. He won't concede his argument. He'll just dig in his heels." Whereas Charlie has clearly defeated his argument and is trying to help him see the truth.
Yeah. What's been the reaction to your article on Crisis? And by the way, folks, it's on crisismagazine.com, The Impact of Charlie Kirk's Death, written by Janet E. Smith. What's been the feedback so far?
Oh, just wonderful. I mean, I actually haven't had any negative feedback, which is astonishing. I mean, I'm on Facebook a lot, and a lot of trolls find me and just love to post nonsense, but they're quiet about this one. And I just love the number of people say and they're mostly my age. I mean, I'm old now, but I mean, people over 40 and under 40 know him, under 30 know him for sure. It's the over 40, sometimes 50, 60, never heard of him. All right. And they go and look him up and they say, wow, why didn't I know about this guy? Well, because again, he's not on mainstream media. Evidently, Fox even kept him off for some time as being too controversial. And so it's only, I keep making this point on my Facebook. If your only news source is CNN, ABC, NBC, etc., you don't know what's going on. You absolutely don't know. You've got to find yourself an alternative news source. I mean, X, formerly Twitter, is now the number one news source in the world. In the world, more people are getting their news from it, but not enough. I mean, you can choose what you hear from. You don't have to. If there's certain right-wing sources you don't like, X is open to everybody. Everybody and anybody can post whatever they want on X. So you can choose who you follow, but you need to follow some people that challenge the mainstream media narrative, and you will find extraordinary things. Like Charlie Kirk. Yeah, people don't know.
Yeah,
Charlie
exactly.
Kirk.
And also to make sure you check and double check if the secular media are insisting something is reality, chances are it's probably not, and it's pretty easy to debunk that by just doing a little bit of research. Janet, we're almost out of time. Any final thoughts on Charlie Kirk?
Oh, I do hope people will spend. I challenge people to spend an hour, to just go in and type in Charlie Kirk, and you'll get these snippets, little 2-minute. Exchanges he had with college students, and he debated at Cambridge, he debated at Oxford. Those full debates are online. Just watch something.
Yeah, check it out.
Watch several things.
Janet, thank you so much. We're out of time, but great to talk to you. The Impact of Charlie Kirk's Death from our friend Dr. Janet E. Smith. We'll be right back. 27 minutes past the hour. Hope your Wednesday is going beautifully. September 17th, 2025. Feast of St. Robert Bellarmine and St. Hildegard, both great minds in the church. Another great mind, St. Benedict. Listen carefully, my son, to your master's instructions and attend to them with the ear of your heart. This is advice from a father who loves you. Welcome it and faithfully put it into practice. This is from the beginning of the Rule of St. Benedict, and it's part of his tradition and the wisdom of his tradition in Christianity. And there was a beautiful blog that I came across in doing some research for this segment of the Trappist monks, and it's trappist.org. And this actual blog was written by Father Jerome McCarr, and it's dated very recently, actually, July 29, 2025. And the reason I wanted to dedicate this segment of Italy Shrines and Wonders based on my book, Italy Shrines and Wonders, is because St. Benedict, of course, obviously was from Italy, born in Norcia, which is in Umbria, a beautiful, beautiful town, and it is about, it's on the eastern side of Umbria, about an hour from Assisi, if you want to think about locations, if you've been to Italy. But what's interesting about St. Benedict is, even though he and his twin sister, Scholastica, were born in Norcia, Benedict was sent to Rome to study. And very quickly, he was very, very upset about what he saw in Rome and even going on in the church. And he decided to get away. And he went to Subacchio. And then he eventually left Subacchio because of a jealous priest and went down to Montecassino, which is in southern Lazio, on the border of Campania, to start the monastery there. But this whole idea of listening with the ear of the heart, right? The ear of your heart. What does this mean? Well, let me just read to you a little bit of what this Trappist monk says. The rule of St. Benedict is part of the wisdom tradition of Christianity that is rooted in the Bible for its inspiration and its ultimate goal. St. Benedict was aware of the importance of seeking guidance from a spiritual elder and of valuing the wisdom that was imparted. Following the lead of the wisdom writers, St. Benedict encouraged his disciples to seek and value wisdom, to seek and ponder God's word, and to incline their hearts toward understanding. And I'm mentioning this morning because this quote regarding listening with the ear of your heart was actually given in a beautiful statement that was released by the interim president of Belmont Abbey College. We ran that statement yesterday in the second hour of the program on our Newman Guide News with Kelly Solomon from the Cardinal Newman Society. And it just reminded me of the importance of listening and being open, having our hearts open. And this is what Charlie Kirk, as Dr. Janet Smith said, was so good at. He listened to people, and he listened with his heart. You heard Janet describing that exchange he had with this young woman who was very pro-gay, very pro-transgender. She was coming up to him and obviously had a problem with everything he said, but he listened to her. And he said at the end of the conversation, I'm going to pray for you. So he sensed something. He was listening with the ear of the heart. And this is what we all need to do in this time where there's so much divisiveness and disagreement and anger. We need to take the high road and always be like St. Benedict and listening to the wisdom of God, and especially listening with the ear of our heart. So I thought I would take you to Bella Italia and give you a little more insight into the beautiful area, not only of Norcia, where he was from, but Montecassino in Lazio, Norcia being in Umbria. And I came across this beautiful, beautiful piece that was done by our Rome Bureau, all about Montecassino and St. Benedict. So we're going to roll the piece for you and take you to central Italy and southern Lazio. Take a listen.
We know that Benedict came to Montecassino from Subiaco, where he had begun his monastic life, first in an eremitic form, and then cenobitic form, with a community. Because of the jealousy of a local priest, Benedict decided to leave Subiaco with a group of disciples and arrived to Montecassino around the year 529.
Following the destruction of the Roman Acropolis and pagan temples dedicated to Apollo, St. Benedict began construction of various oratories, dedicated, among others, to St. Martin and St. John the Baptist. In this first monastery of the order, St. Benedict wrote down his renowned rule, shaping a monastic life centered around prayer, work, study, and hospitality.
Then, first and foremost, during the Carolingian epoch, thanks to the work of Charles the Great and St. Benedict himself, the Benedictine rule got diffused and eventually becomes the unique role for Occidental monasticism. From that moment on, the Benedictine monasticism, from here in Montecassino, becomes not only important but unifying for the monastic experience during the reign of Charles the Great, but also in the following epochs.
The ecclesial and political influence of the abbey peaked in the 11th century, during the time of the great abbot Desiderius, who later became Pope Victor III, and who not only rebuilt the abbey and re-established monastic discipline, but also saw to it that the monastery library became one of the richest in Europe. by collecting and translating manuscripts from all cultures, nations, and times into Latin.
Noi qui abbiamo due luoghi dove custodiamo il patrimonio.
Here we have two places where we preserve the literary patrimony. The first place is the archive, where all the old manuscripts are, and the other is the library, which is where we are standing right now, where all the printed books are. We have what we call an ancient source, which is the one we are looking at right now, and which is composed over 32,000 volumes. By ancient sources, we mean incunables, that is, books printed after the inventions of the press by Gutenberg, and all the way until 1830.
Da parte di Gutenberg e fino al 1830.
However, the preservation of the many literary and cultural treasures of the Abbey proved to be not an easy feat. Throughout the centuries, the Abbey suffered several destructions, such as by the Lombards in 570, by the Saracens in 883, and by an earthquake in 1349. The most notable destruction, however, happened just 80 years ago in 1944, when the monastery was bombed during the Second World War.
La zona in cui
The zone where the monks lived, the oldest part of the monastery where the cell of St. Benedict was located, was saved from destruction, so neither monks nor civilians died there, as they did in other zones.
si è salvata.
Also, the burial place of St. Benedict and St. Scholastica was somehow miraculously saved. The place was saved because a grenade that fell there didn't explode, but there was a loss of lives. And then, of course, for the symbolic value which the Abbey represented, certainly there was an event that in some way had a big emotional impact, certainly for this territory and the Abbey itself.
Beautiful piece, and you can find that from our Rome Bureau, and you can go to the YouTube page of EWTN and look it up. It's really, really well done, and it takes you, again, to areas of Italy that are associated with St. Benedict. And just a reminder, this beautiful quote, let's think about it this week, and let's ponder it. We need to listen with the ear of our hearts, to be open to people. And here's another great quote from this Trappist monk blog. If we wish to listen with the ears of our heart, we need to separate ourselves from external noise and work at cultivating internal stillness. Silence safeguards a space for us to listen to God's voice and experience his hidden presence. St. Benedict did that so well, and in many ways so did Charlie Kirk. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to debate as well unless he really listened with the ear of his heart. What a great thing to emulate. We'll be right back. Interestingly enough, this is truly an evergreen article written by our guest, Meg Hunter-Kilmer, originally published in 2020. Wow, talk about disagreements that were going on back and forth. And here we are again, where we're still, needing to listen to each other, as I mentioned in the previous segment, being like St. Benedict and listening with the ear of the heart. So, Meg, this is a great article, and some of the saints some people may not be all that familiar with. So let's start with the first two. Of course, St. Oscar Romero, a lot of people know, but some of the other names may not be as well known. So how did you decide, how did you find these different saints in terms of they disagreed about certain things but were able to still be friends? How did you go about researching this? Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Glad to be here. You know, I kind of just keep a database of saints in various different categories, and at some point over the years, I was like, gosh, there've got to be saints who really were ideologically enemies, but recognized that in most circumstances, ideology doesn't give you a right to consider a person your opponent. Now, there are obviously outliers. There are some really toxic circumstances if someone is like an extreme racist, right? Or living in a way that is really hateful to other people, then maybe you're not going to be able to be friends with them, right? But most of the stuff that we disagree with, we're still able to live in community. We're still able to have a relationship. And Oscar Romero and his friend Rutilio Grande were really the first pair that I ran across where I was like, oh, wow, I don't know that these two would be friends in 2020, but they were really close in the 70s. I wonder what was going on there.
So what was going on? Tell us.
So Romero, as I think many people who know the story, was fairly conservative liturgically, politically, ideologically, in the wake of, or leading up to the First Vatican Council and then in the wake of the First Vatican Council. And his political conservatism made him very hesitant to get involved in some of the difficulties in El Salvador at the time, which included a lot of disappearings of people, a lot of murder by the government. It was both his political conservatism and also just as a person, he was like, I don't know if I can do this, right? I don't know if I can say these things. Meanwhile, Rutilio Grande, he's one of the priests in the button-down shirts and the khakis, right? He's very interested in a lot of the reforms of the council, both liturgically and in seminary formation, right? These are guys who end up on the opposite side of a lot of issues, but didn't see that as being an impediment to their friendship. Rutilio actually...
Oops, are you there? I think we lost you. Oh, I think we lost our guest, but we will work on getting her back. We are having a great conversation, or we're having a great conversation with Meg Hunter-Kilmer and her article that was originally printed in 2020. And again, let's go back 5 years. Think about it in 2020, how we had so many disagreements about so many things, and there was so much upheaval in terms of the way people were being treated for their opinions, and the cancel culture was just out there like crazy. And parents who are showing up at school board meetings are getting dragged out and arrested, and all kinds of people are losing their jobs over the COVID vaccine, and on and on and on. But there are saints, as she says in this beautiful article, again, that was dated back in 2020, who teach us we can disagree and still be respectful. You can find it at aleteia.org. That's a website where you'll find it. And she was just talking about the first two saints on her list, St. Oscar Romero and Venerable Rutilio Grande. Now, they were from the 20th century, obviously. And then she goes all the way back to St. Philip Neri in the 16th century and St. 16th century and St. Camillus. And then she also goes back even further to the 8th century to St. Theodore and also St. Nicephorus of Constantinople. I hope I'm pronouncing their names correctly. So these are the 6 saints that she's chosen for this article, and we're working on getting her back on, and we'll see what happens there. But why don't we do this? Why don't we take a quick break? It is about 43 minutes past the hour. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back, and hopefully we'll have our guest back with us. And again, the article can be found at Aleteia. Oh, we have her. Okay, great. We don't have to take a break. Yay, Meg, we lost you. I don't know what happened, but thanks for joining us again. We're about to take a break, but you're with us. So continue in your conversation. I'm sorry we got cut off. Go ahead.
You know what? I just told the whole story before I realized the phone had cut off. Can you tell me where I was when I stopped?
Well, we were mentioning the fact that they disagreed on so many issues in terms of liturgy, the way liturgy was conducted, and in terms of politics and whatnot. But they kept that friendship for a very, very long time, right?
They did, yes, and there was a lot of back and forth. But even when they were disagreeing, they managed to remain friends. And when Rutilio was shot for his work with the poor, Romero ended up going and praying before his body and realizing that if they had killed him for this work, that Romero had to continue in his footsteps.
Wow. And then you go back further, of course. I was just mentioning you go all the way back to the 16th century, right?
Yes. In the 16th century, obviously, another time that was really full of controversy and difficulty in the Catholic Church. But the two that I really focused on there were St. Philip Neri and St. Camillus de Lellis, who didn't have major ideological differences. They were good friends, but Philip Neri was also Camillus' spiritual director. And Camillus had been through it. He had a major conversion, but just kept backsliding. And every time that he left the home where he was living to try and live a different life, he would backslide again. And at a certain point, he realized that God was calling him to found a religious order. And when he went to Philip Neri and he said, "This is what God is calling me to," Neri was like, "Buddy, look, every time you leave where you're living, everything goes badly for you." And they disagreed. And finally, Neri said, "Look, if you're not going to listen, I can't be your spiritual director anymore." And Camilla said, "Okay, well, this is what God is calling me to, so thank you for all that you've done for me." and he left, and he ended up founding a religious order that still exists today. And Philip Neri ended up asking his forgiveness and saying, you were right on this one. But again, a beautiful thing that they were able to reconcile after this difference that could have been a friendship ender. But they were able to see that really they were seeking the same Jesus, even though they were doing it in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting that St. Philip went back and apologized and asked for forgiveness on this. And that's, again, this idea of being open, to your own correction when you realize that maybe you're judging someone improperly.
Exactly. And I think the fact that their disagreement had been cordial, right? Philip had put his foot down, but he hadn't said, you're a piece of garbage, you don't deserve anybody's love, right? Like, this is just asking for forgiveness was not, gosh, I was terrible to you on the internet for a decade, right? This is, wow, I really should have listened that one time. And it certainly makes it easier when we're treating people with dignity the whole time for there to be reconciliation if there is a division at a certain point.
That's the thing I think that is that's so clear here in your article. I think this brings it out so well, because this is what we've lost in this century. I think we just lost the art of disagreeing with people respectfully. When it happened that we disagree with someone and all of a sudden that person is a hater or you're a hater, right?
Exactly. And we forget to consider that this is the person Jesus died for. And so our invitation is to love people, even if maybe that person is a hater. And maybe we need to have some boundaries, right? We don't have to be best friends with everybody, but we can treat everybody with kindness and with dignity. I mean, you look at the way that Jesus treated people who were literally nailing him to the cross. If he was able to love them and to act as though they were human beings deserving of respect, then certainly the troll in my mentions on Facebook is somebody that I can treat like a human being.
Mm-hmm. All right, then you go even further back in time for St. Nicephorus. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
I think I would say Nicephorus, but I don't know how many people have said it in English. He's not a headliner. Nicephorus of Constantinople and Theodore the Studite. And I love these two because they were both within the church, right? And when I say within the church, they were both priests, and they were in the same diocese, and were just back and forth for years and years, the things that they disagreed about. I mean, basically everything. And they weren't buddies, right? This wasn't a Romero and Rutilio situation where they're like, well, they argue all the time, but really they get along at the breakfast table. Like, these two really at each other's throats. Nicephorus, who was the patriarch of Constantinople, had celebrated a putative marriage of someone who was already married, and Theodore, of course, opposed this. And he wrote in opposition to what his bishop had done that was against church teaching, and was accused of schism and was banished by the emperor. And eventually he was brought back, but they continued to be opponents, right? Nicephorus was in favor of the death penalty. Theodore was against. Nicephorus was in favor of kicking refugees out of the country. Theodore was against. Again, some things that really resonate with our current situation. But they both believed in Jesus the Christ, who had suffered, died, and risen from the dead. And when somebody who was an actual heretic took office in Constantinople, they both opposed him. They were both sent into exile, and they both died in communion with each other and with the church because they were able to see the person on the other side of the position.
And last but not least, you go all the way back to St. Martin of Tours.
Yeah, 4th century. These two are great. Martin of Tours and Bryce of Tours. This is not a political ideology. These are not differences of opinion. Bryce was just terrible. Like, St. Bryce of Tours was just a rotten human being. I mean, he's a monk and a deacon and owns slaves. Like, really? How did you manage that as a monk, right? And he's, like, arrogant. And Martin of Tours was the holiest man alive. And he had adopted Bryce as a child, raised him in the monastery, and Bryce was all the time trash-talking him and calling him a barbarian and calling him the old fool, right? Like, made fun of him for the location of his birth because he hadn't been born in the Roman Empire. And Martin just loved him and loved him and loved him and loved him. And there's this great line. He said, if Jesus could come to terms with Judas, then I can certainly come to terms with Bryce. And
yes,
I love
that line.
I love that comparison because there are times when I look at my opponent and I'm like, this person really is Judas Iscariot in my life. And she's like,
Mm-hmm.
And actually that doesn't give you permission to hate him. And I'm like, dang, I really thought that one was going to be enough. Like, I really thought on this matter I was going to win. And they actually
or how about the
reconciled.
readings at the day after the shooting of Charlie Kirk and the day of September 11th, right? The readings of the gospel. Pray for those who
where you walked in and you were like,
love your enemies.
Yeah, and you were like, this wasn't chosen for September 11th. This was just what the Lord had in mind for us to hear today, that we are obligated to love no matter what.
Yeah.
And eventually,
you did a great job with this
died.
article. And yeah. Oh, go ahead. We have about a minute left, so go ahead. Let you wrap up.
Okay, I was just going to say Martin died and they hadn't yet been reconciled, but the grace of God was still working. And in the communion of saints, when Bryce repented and ultimately became a saint, the two were able to be reconciled even across that great divide. And now there they are in heaven together. So there's never an end to the hope of reconciliation and peace in Jesus Christ.
Amen, sister. A well-written article, and I'm hoping that they republish this, put it out there on the website now, because it's something that I think is evergreen and timeless. I mean, especially for what we're going through in our country today. Meg Hunter-Kilmer, thank you. And this article, again, published on Alatea. This was back in 2020. Saints who teach us we can disagree and still be respectful. What a concept. Meg, thanks so much.
My pleasure. Have a great one.
You too. Have a great week. And we will be back to let you know what's coming up in the second hour of Catholic Connection. Again, the article entitled Saints Who Teach Us We Can Disagree and Still Be Respectful, going all the way back to the 4th century with St. Martin of Tours and St. Bryce of Tours. If they can do it, so can we, because we're supposed to emulate the saints, right? We'll be right back. Hope you're having a great Wednesday, middle of the week, September 17th already, almost the end of summer. It ends the 21st, so double check that on the calendar. And moving right along, the second hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN's Radio Extra is coming up. And in 2 cents, I want to take a look at the ethics or lack thereof of journalism. I found another interesting video with an expert on journalism ethics who's going to walk through the 5 points of ethics in journalism. And I also want to play a clip, a very alarming clip from, I guess it shouldn't be alarming, ABC News, and this reporter who is highlighting the text between the gunman in the Kirk shooting, Robinson, and his boyfriend, who apparently identified as a girl. Now, it's one thing to report that as part of the facts, because there was a conversation and there were conversations leading up to the shooting, and he confessed to it online. There's a number of things he confessed to his parents. So, okay, fine, those are facts. But when you start making commentary in a news report about how tender and how beautiful these texts were between this murderer and his lover, as if he were doing a defense, right? It was like he was working for the defense attorneys in this case. It's just off the charts, unbelievable in terms of a lack of ethics and a total lack of understanding of one's responsibility. And yet this video that I found really does a good job of showing, without naming names, because this video was done long before the Charlie Kirk incident, of the lack of accountability, transparency, and responsibility in terms of journalism ethics on the part of this ABC News reporter. So that's coming up on EWTN Radio Extra. Plus, how to be closer to the face of Christ, this icon, this beautiful icon. We're talking about that as well.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Second hour of Catholic Connection here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Thanks so much for tuning in on a Wednesday, September 17, 2025. Continuing our conversation in the news this morning and in our 2 cents segment regarding Charlie Kirk and the assassination that took place a week ago today on a college campus in Utah. Big memorial service coming up this weekend on Sunday. We'll have all the details in the news. So coming up in 2 cents, we're going to take a look at this bizarre, but I guess it's not so bizarre when you consider the state of the media and the extreme bias on the left. There's a reporter on ABC who does a story about the information that's being released now by the authorities. There was the press conference yesterday. There was the court hearing in the arraignment of Robinson, the 22-year-old suspect who admitted to shooting and killing Charlie Kirk. He admitted to it online in texts and conversations with other people in different chat rooms. He also admitted it to his parents. He's not cooperating with the police, apparently, but there's all kinds of trails everywhere else in terms of him being associated and connected to the shooting. And so this reporter takes the information from the press conference and basically transcribing the text messages between the gunman and his lover, his live-in partner, and he proceeds to go on and talk about how tender, how intimate they are. And I'm watching this and I'm saying, what in the world are you doing? You're supposed to be a reporter. Give us the facts. Nothing wrong with sharing the text because that's part of the investigation. But what are you doing? Why are you trying to make this about a love story versus the murder of a person in cold blood and putting other people in harm's way? So we're going to share that ridiculous excuse for a news story, a report, and take a look at how it compares to accuracy in journalism, the foundation of ethical journalism. 5 points: accuracy, independence, impartiality, humanity, and accountability. We'll talk about that in 2 cents. And then we're going to, do something that's super important. This is what we always have to remember. My spiritual director always says, all things Christ. And I'm looking forward to speaking with Dr. Carrie Gress, and she's going to help us increase our devotion to the holy face of Christ. And can't we use that right now? Oh my goodness, with everything that's going on. So that is our program for today, the second hour of Catholic Connection on a Wednesday, middle of the week. Let's take a look at the forecast before we check the news. There's a coastal storm impacting the mid-Atlantic, and we have heavy to excessive rain in the plains, and we have Tropical Depression 7 in the Atlantic. So here's more details on the weather. A coastal storm continuing to bring bands of heavy rain, gusty winds, minor coastal flooding, and rip currents over the mid-Atlantic region, and that will happen today. We also have heavy rain showers and thunderstorms that are persisting across the plains, with possible excessive rainfall over the western South Dakota areas, and a tropical depression, as we said, number 7, forming in the central Atlantic. It could become part of a tropical storm, and they say that could happen sometime today. We appreciate your listenership here at EWTN, and this is again the second hour of our program, EWTN's Radio Extra. Right now, let's see what's happening in the news on a Wednesday, September 17th. Here we go. The man accused of assassinating Charlie Kirk a week ago today is being held without bond in the state of Utah. Tyler Robinson appearing at a virtual hearing in Provo yesterday, where he was informed the state is seeking the death penalty in his case.
We did file just recently, within the last few minutes, a notice of intent to seek the death penalty. That was filed by Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray.
That was State Prosecutor Chad Grunander. The 22-year-old Robinson appeared in a green bulletproof vest and nodded as the judge spoke, never changing his expression as all of the charges against him were read aloud. Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray earlier said it was his decision alone to seek the death penalty in the case. Utah is one of 5 states that allows execution by firing squad if lethal injection is unavailable. And authorities in Utah, as Mark Mayfield tells us, say a man who was arrested just after Charlie Kirk was assassinated claimed he fired the shot to help the real shooting suspect escape.
The Utah County Sheriff says 71-year-old George Zinn yelled that he was the shooter to allow the actual suspect to flee. Tyler Robinson was arrested late Thursday and has been charged with aggravated murder for the killing of the conservative activist. Robinson apparently acknowledged Zinn's arrest, telling his roommate in a text message that police had grabbed some crazy old dude. Zinn is being held on charges of obstruction of justice and possession of child sex abuse material. I'm Mark Mayfield.
President Trump and Vice President Vance will both deliver remarks at the memorial service for Charlie Kirk. The Hill reports both will speak at Sunday's service at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. Kirk's widow Erica will also give remarks along with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Kirk was shot and killed during an event in Utah Valley University again last week, and the 22-year-old suspect, Tyler Robinson, has been now charged with murder, as we just explained. And Kate Fisher tells us the State Department says anyone celebrating the assassination of conservative activist Kirk will be denied a visa or face having it revoked if they already have one.
Secretary of State Rubio wrote on X that America will not host foreigners who celebrate the death of our fellow citizens, saying a visa means you're a visitor and we're not in the business of inviting people to visit our country who are going to be involved in negative and destructive behaviour. And he said if they're already here, we should be revoking their visa. The Trump administration has already taken the visas off hundreds of foreign students with pro-Palestinian views, which critics argue infringes free speech. Kate Fisher, Washington.
A Texas State University student expelled yesterday after being caught on video acting out conservative activist Charlie Kirk's assassination during an on-campus memorial event hosted by a local Turning Point USA chapter. The video, filmed on the university's San Marcos campus on Monday, appeared to show the male student with a backpack cursing at the crowd, hitting his neck, and pretending he was shot. The man then stood up in front of a statue and said, "Hi, my name is Charlie Kirk," acted out the assassination, falling to the ground, and further mocking the death of the 31-year-old father of two. The Texas governor, Greg Abbott, calling for the student's expulsion in an X post, and the Texas state president later confirming the student in the video was identified, saying, "I will not tolerate behavior that marks, trivializes, or promotes violence on our campuses." The school president wrote in a statement, the individual is no longer a student at Texas State. In other news this morning, Annunciation Catholic school students returning to class this week following the recent deadly mass shooting at the church. School resuming today. There will be support services and a security presence. The school shooting happened on August 27th during a back-to-school mass when a 23-year-old is accused of shooting through a window and killing 2 children and wounding 21 students and adults. Registered nurses at Ascension St. Agnes Hospital in Baltimore demanding the Catholic hospital claim Shane DeFest from industries they say violate church values. They held a protest Monday morning, citing a nursing union report that claims Ascension invests in companies tied to weapons, gambling, tobacco, and more. The nurses are in contract negotiations and are also calling for better staffing and patient care. Ascension Health spokesperson telling a local TV station the hospital follows faith-based investment standards, reinvesting all its earnings into patient care, wages, and services for those in need. President Trump is in the UK for an official state visit. Before leaving, he spoke with reporters on a number of topics, including a deal to save TikTok in the U.S.
I've reached a deal with China. I'm going to speak to President Xi on Friday to confirm everything up. We made a very good trade deal, and I hope good for both countries, but a very different deal than they'd made in the past.
He did not provide information or details, but said a group of very big companies wants to buy TikTok U.S. operations. He was also asked about what he said about another U.S. strike on a Venezuelan drug boat. The Trumps are taking part in many events, and that included a wreath-laying ceremony at the tomb of Queen Elizabeth II and a banquet at Windsor Castle. The President and First Lady are coming back to the U.S. tomorrow. FBI Director Kash Patel saying there's no credible information that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked women to anyone beside himself. During a contentious hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday, Patel insisting authorities have released all the information on Epstein that was deemed credible. He went on to say that because a U.S. attorney in Florida improperly narrowed the scope of investigation into Epstein years ago, the FBI's files are limited. In the same hearing, meanwhile, Patel and Democrats on the committee shouted at one another over a variety of topics. And state terrorism charges against alleged United Healthcare CEO killer Luigi Mangione have now been dropped. The 27-year-old learned at his court hearing Tuesday that he's no longer facing the top murder count, but the second-degree murder charges remain. The judge tossed the charges of first-degree murder as an act of terrorism, ruling the charges were legally insufficient. The judge said hearings for Mangione's case to start on December 1st, but a trial date has yet to be determined. Mangione has pleaded not guilty to charges in New York and Pennsylvania, along with federal charges. Tammy Trujillo tells us OpenAI is now announcing new teen safety features for ChatGPT.
Now the AI chatbot will include an age prediction system and ID age verification in some countries. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman described the struggles of balancing OpenAI's priorities of freedom and safety in a recent blog post. He shared that the company was working to build a system that would try to sort users into a version of the software for adolescents 13 to 17 and one for adults 18 and older. The company made the announcement hours before a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on the potential harm of AI chatbots was set to start. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
And Matt Madison tells us there's some good news from the retail front. Retail sales rising more than expected last month.
Government figures show sales increased 0.6% for the month as consumers spent at a faster clip than experts predicted. Excluding autos, sales nearly doubled forecasts and came in well ahead of July's pace. Bars and restaurants led the way, with gas station receipts up 0.5%. On an annual basis, retail sales were up 5%. I'm at Mattinson.
National Hurricane Center tracking 2 Atlantic systems, with Gabriel expected to be born in the central tropical Atlantic in the near future.
But currently right now models look to curve that out north of the islands out there, so no threat here to Florida.
Hurricane specialist Larry Kelly saying a second system just coming off the African coast and a little south of a dust plume has a low chance of developing over the next week. While they are currently monitoring the entire region as we shift into late September and October, the Caribbean and Gulf traditionally become the hotbeds for tropical development. Jennifer Pilsoni tells us Academy Award-winning director and actor Robert Redford has passed away.
Born in Santa Monica, California in 1936, Redford won an Oscar in 1981 for directing the film Ordinary People. His acting credits included the movies Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid, All Is Lost and Unfinished Life, The Sting, Spy Game, The Horse Whisperer, among many. He's also credited as the founder of the Sundance Film Festival. Redford died at his home in Utah. He was 89 years old. I'm Jennifer Bolsoni.
And Mount St. Helens may have looked to some like it might be erupting recently again, but it turns out apparently it was just leftover ash from the deadly 1980 eruption blowing into the air. The U.S. Geological Survey saying this time of year, when the snow has melted, strong winds around the volcano in Washington state can blow the exposed ash into the air. Commercial airline pilots saw the phenomenon known as ash resuspension and reported it. Mount St. Helens alert level remains normal, but experts caution that any time there's resuspended ash in the air, it can be a hazard to aviation and health. It is a Wednesday morning, September 17, 2025. Hope your day is going well. When we come back, we are going to take a look at media again. Now, I know I'll go into more detail again probably on Fact Check Friday, but I cannot wait until Friday to talk about this story, if you can even call it that. A reporter from ABC News just gushing over the private text between the gunman who was in court yesterday, Robinson, 22 years old from Utah, charged with the murder of Charlie Kirk, and his live-in lover who identifies as a woman apparently. And just gushing how personal this is and such an intimate look at the murderer. What does it have to do with reporting? Nothing. And we'll discuss up next. Stay tuned. There's so many examples of bad journalism out there with this horrible story involving the assassination of Charlie Kirk last Wednesday, a week ago today. I don't know where to begin. I told my producer Richard that there'll probably be more of this on Friday for Fact Check Friday. But as I said going into the break, I could not wait until Friday to share this with you because it's very important. If you're listening to the first hour of the show, you remember Dr. Janet Smith, and she wrote a powerful piece on Crisis Magazine about the impact of Charlie Kirk's death. And she really encouraged us to make sure that we're not just listening to the secular press. Obviously, if you can hear my voice, you're listening to other sources, which is a good thing. But it's really important to understand, to know how the media works so they don't work on us, as Archbishop Chaput always said. If we don't understand the proper way to do a story, the who, what, where, when, why, and how, we can be easily duped into thinking that what the reporters are doing or saying is part of their responsibility as so-called journalists. And 9 times out of 10, lately, it's not. This is probably one of the worst examples I've seen. And this is ABC News correspondent Matt Gutman, who went on the air after the hearing yesterday, after the arraignment of Tyler Robinson, literally gushing over the text messages between Tyler Robinson and his transgender roommate. Now, it's one thing, because this was brought out in the news conference, and this is brought out on many other stories. Okay, that's fine. Reporting that there was a conversation between Robinson, the suspect, and his transgender roommate, who apparently they have been in a relationship for a while. And that was one of the reasons he was so angry. He went very, very left, according to his family, in the last 2 years, filled with indoctrination and leftist ideology. Okay? So reporting on the fact that there was a conversation, that there was a relationship, that the roommate was aware possibly of what was going on, that's all factual and that should be reported, but it needs to be reported as fact. You don't step in when you're wearing a reporter's hat and act like you're part of the defense team, trying to paint a positive picture or a more humane picture about this person who shot someone in cold blood and also put so many thousands of other people in harm's way last Wednesday at a college campus in Utah. So we're going to roll this tape of part of the report by correspondent, if you can call him that, Matt Gutman, gushing over these text messages, and then come back and talk to you about how the story should have been covered in terms of journalism ethics. Here we go.
We have seen an alleged murder with such specific text messages about the alleged murder weapon, where it was hidden, how it was placed, what was on it, but also it was very touching in a way that I think many of us didn't expect. A very intimate portrait into this relationship between the suspect's roommate and the suspect himself, with him repeatedly calling his roommate, who is transitioning, calling him my love, and I want to protect you, my love. So it was this duality of someone who the attorney said not only jeopardized the life of Charlie Kirk and the crowd, but was doing it in front of children, which is one of the aggravating circumstances of this case. And on the other hand, he was, speaking so lovingly about his partner. So a very interesting and, as Pierre said, riveting press conference, David.
It was tough.
There's so much to say about this. That was just horrible. It's one thing, again, to report the fact that there was a conversation, that there were texts that were going out because it pertains to the investigation in the case. I get that. But you could easily have let the police or the prosecutors say that because there was a press conference, and you could roll tape, as we would say, or cut to the soundbite, SOT, sound on tape. You don't have to gush over these text messages, calling them very touching and very intimate. Because what you're doing is, again, you're trying to sound like this was a very, very healthy relationship, and that really this gunman was just trying to protect his boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever the person was, and where they are in that process, God only knows, and we pray for them. But you get my drift. And this so-called reporter was totally absent when it came to doing his job in putting forth the who, what, where, when, why, and how, and the basic 5 values of ethical journalism, which include accuracy, independence, impartiality, humanity, and accountability. So think about that audio that we rolled for you as you listen to this expert from the Ethical Journalism Network, Aidan White, on the 5 values that are supposed to be the foundation of ethical journalism. Take a listen.
And the first of them is accuracy. I won't say truth, because truth is a very long word. It actually gets us into a discussion about really what is true and what is not true. But accuracy is very important. So therefore, the first principle is no deceptive handling of the facts. We work in facts, so fact-based information. Secondly, there's the principle of independence. The work that you do is your own work, but it's not on behalf of anyone else. You're not there to be a spokesman for the government. You're not there to be a representative of a particular business group or a special interest group. You have transparency in what you do, so that when you are speaking and dealing with your audience and producing material, you're acting independently as an independent professional. Thirdly, there is the principle of impartiality. That is to say, you recognize that there's more than one side of a story. And very often there's more than 2 sides of a story. And as a journalist, you're responsible for looking and thinking about what are the other sides of this story. Here is one story that's being told, but what are the other opinions that I need to bring in to make the story whole? And then fourthly, there's the question of humanity. As a journalist, you're expected to show humanity. And what I mean by that is you're expected to be aware of the consequences of what you publish and what you broadcast. So you have to be aware that sometimes the words you use, the pictures you show can do damage. They can be harmful to people. It's not the job of a journalist to do undue harm. It's our job to protect people. And it's very important that when we are in reporting, we don't indulge in hate speech. We don't show obscene images. We don't show unnecessarily explicit images of violence and so on, because we are part of a humanitarian process, and that's what journalism should be. So humanity is a very important part of it. And fifthly is the issue of accountability. It's the one that's probably most difficult for journalists, and that's we're not a humble group. We find it difficult to say sorry and to admit our mistakes, even though we can be lacerating in our criticism of others. But we have to do that. We have to engage with the audience, and we have to correct our mistakes, and we have to be prepared to provide remedies when we get it wrong and do damage. So these principles are pretty straightforward. Accuracy, independence, impartiality, humanity, and accountability. Those are the things that what make journalism different and distinct.
Well, I would say that Mr. Gutman just threw all those things out the window: accuracy, independence, impartiality, humanity, and accountability. When he talked about the fact that you are supposed to be independent, you're not supposed to be a spokesperson for anyone. If you go back and watch that story or listen to it again, Gutman sounded like he was a spokesperson for the gunman, for the defense, and trying to put a character witness out there in terms of it was very touching, it was very intimate. Those kinds of descriptive words have no place in a news report, okay? Because it doesn't sound like you're being independent. It sounds like you're being a spokesperson. And it's not very accurate. It may be true in terms of the actual text that they were there, but you're putting a different angle on it. You're editorializing when you use those types of words, okay? And then what about the impartiality? How is that being impartial? And how is that helping a situation, right? How are you being impartial? How are you showing that there's more than one side of a story? Not to mention that there are so many stories out there right now that are painting Charlie Kirk and conservatives as the bad guys, that he deserved it. This is what happens when you speak your mind as a conservative. You just sit down and shut up. We've been told that for years, and it's getting worse. And in this way, the reporter, again, is not considering this. And what about humanity? How humane is it to the wife and the family members of Charlie Kirk? Or how humane is it to the people who are in harm's way, those students who were there, who saw him shot, who saw Charlie Kirk shot, and the blood go everywhere? How humane is it? What does it do to their trauma to hear this reporter talking about these very intimate and personal, touching details of this conversation between a man who shot somebody in cold blood in front of thousands of other innocent people? How is that humane to everybody else that was impacted by this? How? They were more concerned about the humanity of the gunman. I'm not saying that we shouldn't consider him a child of God and pray for him and forgiveness, but justice has to take its course. But this is not how you do a news story, for crying out loud. And the accountability, forget about it. As this Aidan White said from the Ethical Journalism Network, the media are all about criticism except when it comes to their own work. Much to think about. Accuracy, independence, impartiality, humanity, and accountability. We'll be right back. Always appreciate the great work of Dr. Carrie Gress, who's given us so much insight into womanhood and especially what radical feminism has done to us and how we misunderstand who we are, made in the image and likeness of God. It's a beautiful article that was posted earlier this month. We'll give you the link to it, and she's writing on Substack here. But I love the title of this and this whole idea of focusing on our Lord, 7 ways to increase your devotion to the holy face of Christ. The Lord is seeking out new St. Veronicas. Carrie, I know this came out a couple of weeks ago, but boy, can we use this right now. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, no, it really feels poignant, I think, at the moment, for sure. And I think that was what the devotion was intended for sure, in our times.
So tell us about the devotion. Is it fairly new in the church?
It goes back to the 1840s, and it was a nun who received this messages from Jesus, and then it was eventually approved. And the whole idea is really just to recognize the importance of the holy face of Jesus, and of course the pain and suffering the face itself experienced during the Passion, but also just the beauty of his face. so poignantly captured in St. Veronica's veil. So I think the idea is just to really imprint on all of us the face of Christ, which, what can we ask for that would be better?
So the image that we are asked to venerate and to look upon, this is dating back to the veil. Of course, the veil of St. Veronica is not in Scripture, but it's something that's been a tradition that's been handed on. But are we encouraged to just look at an image of our Lord's face, or are we encouraged to find an image online or somewhere of one associated with this tradition in the Church of St. Veronica?
So there's not one specific version.
Okay.
There's a couple that have been medals and whatnot that have been struck. But I think that it's the idea, of course, is just the to have this intimacy with the face of Christ, and really to recognize that's what we need to honor that. And the message was talking specifically about the ways in which we live with irreverence, blasphemy, and of course taking the Lord's name in vain, and really recapturing back into us this idea of the sacredness of the holy face and the reverence that's due it and due God, and to really restore that. And it's certainly connected with all the things that we're dealing with in the culture today, the woke culture, communism. In fact, that was really what it was meant to fight, was these radical ideologies that we know are enslaving us in so many different ways to the state, and have been doing so for well over a century now.
Yeah. So you have 7 ways we can get closer and learn more and devote ourselves to the face of Christ. Number 1 is read more about the devotion, right?
Yeah. So that's 2 of them. It knocks out. One of them is just a great tan book about learning about the devotion and where it came from and the messages associated with it. And then the next one is a more recent book, also by Tan, called The Secrets of the Devotion of the Holy Face. I think that's the title of it. Secret of the Holy Face. And that's just an incredible book that just brings together, I think, simultaneously all the contemporary issues that we're dealing with, and connecting it back to that and showing its importance, but also showing just the radical efficacy of this devotion in terms of wiping out our ideological enemies, and really restoring the culture to something healthy and fruitful and beautiful again.
Now, you talk about in number 3, this beautiful rosary that you have at Theology of Home. It's really something, and this is something that you've done. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so this devotion has come to mean so much to me, and I just thought, I really would love to have on offer a rosary. We had a couple of them, and this lapis one, I think, is just stunning, and certainly a gift. I know we've had people give it as wedding gifts and things like that. But yeah, it just seemed like being mindful of this and having the face of Christ, in your hand while you're praying the rosary, it can only bear great fruit and just be such a great reminder of focusing our attention on the life of Christ through the rosary mysteries.
Yeah, I'm wondering because, we now have had the Shroud of Turin with us, and there's been 2 times in recent history that it's been exposed. I've had the privilege of seeing the Shroud twice. And of course, if you go to, in Abruzzo, you have Montepello, and you have the image of Jesus there. So there's so many ways that we can gaze upon our Lord's face, right?
Yeah. No, and not only that, I think too, there's something very just fundamental in the human heart that we have this longing for his face too. And I think providing images like those you've just mentioned to have in our homes, or very tangible ways to be reminded of him, is really important for the sacramental life.
Yeah. How important is it, do you think, in addition to obviously looking upon these images of the face of Christ, but to have these, and Mother Angelica always called them the sacramentals, have them in our home?
Right.
I mean, I have pictures of Jesus all over the place, I have to say.
Right. Yeah. No, I think these are really important, not just for the people that place them there, but certainly for our children, but also for people that come into our homes and experience something different. Our hospitality is meant to be different than that which is the rest of the world can offer. So they may feel small and subtle, but I think that their impact can, over a long period of time, can absolutely not just form ourselves, but form our children, their friends, all the people that we encounter in small ways.
Yeah. Talking with Dr. Carrie Gress, a fellow at the Washington, D.C. based think tank Ethics and Public Policy Center, and a scholar at the Institute of Human Ecology at Catholic University of America. She's a doctorate in philosophy from the Catholic U and is the editor, of course, of the online women's magazine Theology of Home. All right, so next up on the Hip Parade, how else can we look upon the face of our Lord?
So the Hallow app now has the chaplet to the Holy Face. And it's read by Major League pitcher Trevor Williams. It's 6 minutes long. There's a long intro, that like a 2-minute long intro that kind of gives you the backstory, which you can skip. And I've just become totally addicted to this chaplet. I had no idea it existed until the Hallow app came out with it. And it's really, really beautiful. It's very simple. It's kind of like the Rosary, but you only say a specific prayer 6 times, which is a psalm that tacks on the Holy Face element. Anyway, it's really beautiful. I think I kind of can't get enough of it. I think this has really launched my devotion to Holy Face, in totally different orbit. And it's just great to have it on my phone. And, when I'm waiting in traffic or things like that, I think this has been such a great addition to the Hallow app and certainly to my own prayer life daily.
How did you discover the devotion of the Holy Face yourself? How did you find it?
I think I just kept seeing the images, and then I read the Secret of the Devotion of the Holy Face. And, I obviously, my work with feminism and then my colleague Noel Maring's work on the woke issue, we feel like we've been inundated with trying to deal with the ideological pieces that are encroaching on us so much. And so that was really where I started paying attention to it, especially when the way that the devotion, the efficacy of the devotion in terms of really just transforming the world through this prayer. I know we think that with the Rosary and whatnot, but it just felt so focused, laser focused on the issues that we're dealing with, not just Noel and I, but the whole culture are dealing with, in our schools and certainly in the news cycle today. So that was what I think has drawn me into it. So, in a way that I never dreamed I'd be so interested in a chaplet and devotion.
Yeah, I do think that right now we're feeling, at least on some levels, and we can talk about this when we come back in terms of the woke culture and your research on this. I think there's somewhat, and maybe I'm wrong, but my prayer is that there's somewhat of a paradigm shift that I think is happening with the shooting last week or recently of Charlie Kirk. We'll be right back more with Dr. Carrie Gress, a beautiful piece, 7 ways to increase your devotion to the Holy Face of Christ. We'll be right back. Hope your day is going well. My spiritual director always tells me, T, all things Christ, and look on the face of Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Dr. Carrie Gress is helping us do that this morning with a beautiful piece that she wrote, and it's entitled 7 Ways to Increase Your Devotion to the Holy Face of Christ. Before we finish up the list, I think we're getting into number 4 or 5. Let's talk, Carrie, because you're an expert on this in terms of the woke culture and especially what radical feminism has done to us. What is your reaction to this incredible, you think of Romans 8:28, all things work together for good in those who love the Lord according to his purpose. This outpouring of support for Charlie Kirk, his family, people going back to Mass, people getting interested in Turning Point. It's just, you're seeing prayer vigils all over the world. I didn't expect that kind of a positive fallout. I thought there would be an interest and an increase, but not this much. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you're right that I would never have guessed that the reaction would have been so, just on a visceral level, and people just want more. They want to go deeper. They want this change in their life, and I think it's incredibly exciting to see that. I think it's obviously abetted by the fact that Charlie Kirk was such a good soul. Like, he was just kind and generous and joyful and peaceful, and I think that there are other people we can think of that don't have those kinds of attributes, and it could have been a much different reaction. But I think that who he was, and that experience of that kind of person really is what is the engine behind this. And it's really beautiful to see that outpouring. Now, I think too, people are just tired of the culture, and they want to feel like, what is it that I can do? And this is especially Turning Point, and people are finding ways to kind of graft themselves into something that's bigger than themselves. I think that's the big key, instead of feeling isolated or alone or like they have to figure out, reinvent their own wheel. They feel like there's a place that they can go and there are other people that they can be with. And that's really an exciting element. I mean, we saw this in Poland with John Paul II, all the Poles, we want God. There's that kind of moment going on, I think, right now.
Do you think it's a eventual paradigm shift? Do you think some of it is just people are looking for answers, or do you think it's a combination of both? What do you think?
Probably both. I mean, we know as Catholics that there are going to be people that are, the seeds are going to get planted, but they won't grow, and they'll just go back to what it is that they did before. We know those parables. We know that there'll be plenty of people that will go deep, and it will really transform their life, and not just their own life, but their immediate family and the subsequent generations. And so I think that's a really exciting prospect, is to help, the work that we have to do in the church to help those people grow their faith in an ordered way. I think that's really important at this opportunity, and to really pray for them as well. That this isn't something that they, become cynical over, or lose their faith, or get distracted, or whatnot, but that we can kind of continue to keep our eyes on God.
Right. Now, all of the issues that you write about and speak about regularly, what I think is interesting right now, a lot of that is being exposed for the lie that it is. Because if you look at, for example, this whole thing with this transgender issue, and I mean, it's coming to all of this is coming to the forefront, I think, even with the shooting in Minnesota. Yeah.
No, and this is, it's got a long trajectory. This is one of the things I did in my book called The End of Woman, that came out in 2023, was just really look at how the trans movement came from the feminist movement. And, it's really all of a piece. When you start tinkering with this idea that gender and the body are different things, this is the natural progression into which feminism has grown. And that all started with Simone de Beauvoir in the 1950s. So it shouldn't surprise us that this is where it's gotten to. But you can just see the real, the unhealth of it, the incredible destruction that it does in people's lives when you start trying to tinker with these things that are just truly untinkerable in human nature, and that human nature is it's going to be destroyed, but it can't be changed. And that I think is at the crux of it, is this idea of changing human nature, which nature always wins. It's going to find a way. It's going to be destructive if we try and work against it, and that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, when you get away from who we are, made in the image and likeness of God, male and female, it falls apart. Right. You can't. That old commercial. You're probably a lot younger than me, but there used to be a commercial on, I think it was out on Parquet Margarine, where they show Mother Nature in the remember that one where she was in the field, and she thought it was butter, and she says, "Oh, I don't like to be fooled. Can't fool Mother Nature in the storm and everything." And it makes me think about, well, that's very true, right? Yeah.
No, and that's that's been the effort for 200 years now, is to try and reorder human nature so that human nature doesn't need God. And I think, tragically, so much of this is a way for people to try to live their lives without God. And kind of feminism in particular being impervious to the vulnerabilities of motherhood. And it's just, we're seeing the fruit of several generations of that, of people who are just starving to be mothered, to be loved, to be cared for. The way that women uniquely offer in the culture.
I don't want to get too much off track, because I want to get back to your list, because it's so strong in helping us focus on that. But I have you here and you're an expert, so I want to ask you this question. Where are the feminists in the whole thing with transgender, especially with sports? Because there's been so much lost that women have gained in terms of the work that they did in this area. It's like, where are they? And how can they support this transgenderism? Yeah, no, it's a really fascinating debate, because there are those that are for it and those that are against it. But I think that's the sad thing, is that, it's just this, when you get so far out in confusion, you just have to kind of keep going with it. That, this is a logical point of this detachment of the body and the soul, in terms of the way that they're trying to describe it. So, it's amazing to hear not just that they're for transgenderism, but they're aggressively for it. The way that J.K. Rowling is being treated is just amazing to me, because she's very much for feminist ideals, and yet she's been so vilified because of the fact that she's not going on with the trans movement. So I think that's the scary part, is just how almost rabid the elements are, the anger and the vitriol. And that's all by design, by the way. I mean, this is, it was in one of my books, well, my last book and my forthcoming book, I outline exactly why women are so angry. And it's because we're encouraged to be angry
because we're much more politically effective when we're angry. And you can see that in women's marches. You can see it in the world. That if you make women angry, your political goals are going to be much more easily achieved than if you've got a woman who's ordered, peaceful, and focused on her sphere of grace.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to number 5. We mentioned number 5, the Hallow app, Chaplet of the Holy Face, and then number 6 is the Holy Face bandana.
Yeah. So we had these commissioned. One of our great readers at Theology of Home made these. She's a master seamstress. And we just had these, Lord, let me see your holy face, a little tag put in it. And, what woman doesn't use a bandana? Even if she doesn't use it for her head, it's great to have as a scarf. You can tie it onto something. It can be, I keep one in my purse just for messes. It just seemed like a great thing, kind of a universal way to tuck in this idea of the holy face. That's still beautiful. And, it's a great gift too. Just something, another little reminder throughout our lives, the daily life of how it is that we can draw closer to Christ.
Well, it's great because you can wear it as a scarf. I'm all about accessorizing, by the way. So you can wear it as a scarf, a headband, or tied on a bag or a purse. Now, my husband and I live in Italy part-time, and in Italy, when you see the bags in the nice leather stores, especially in Florence and other places, they always have a very chic scarf tied on the
Always have the chic scarf. Yep. Yep. No.
So there you go.
Great. Yeah.
You can be faithful and fashionable at the same time.
There's no reason why we shouldn't be both.
Right. All right. So Holy Face bandana number 6, and one more. And I love the fact that it comes in so many different color patterns too. The bandana.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Oh, it's so fun picking out these patterns. This Liberty fabric is just gorgeous. It's so soft on the hand. They're really special bandanas.
And then Litany to the Holy Face of Jesus. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I didn't know about this. I found it, but it's on a Carmelite website, and there's actually a whole litany, and it's really beautiful because it just steps you through Christ's life and, the relationship of the face, when he's born and through the Passion and all of that. So it just is another really rich way, especially I think for those of us that do pray the Rosary daily. It's nice to have a different way to start praying through those mysteries with visuals and mental images. And so I found this to be a really great asset for that as well.
All right, I want to review the numbers. The 7, of course, is God's perfect number, but we're going to start from the top, and this is from the article 7 Ways to Increase Your Devotion to the Holy Face of Christ. And Carrie Gress, Dr. Carrie Gress, is our guest who wrote this beautiful piece. And all the information is in the article. It's really great, and giving you links and whatnot, and also where you can buy the items we mentioned. Number 1 is read more about the devotion. Number 2 is read the 2022 book, The Secret of the Holy Face, a devotion destined to save society. And number 3 is the Holy Face Rosary, which you can find at Theology of Home. Number 4 is get to know more about the Chaplet of the Holy Face of Jesus. Hallow has this on their app. And then also the Hallow app, Chaplet of the Holy Face as well. And then the Holy Face bandana, which is really pretty and has a tag inside that says, Lord, let me see your holy face. And then, of course, we go down to number 7, the Litany to the Holy Face of Jesus. So do you think this devotion is growing? I mean, based on the fact that you're writing this article, you must see an interest in it, right?
Yeah, I think it is growing. I think it will continue to grow. I just noticed, too, the other day that Charlie Kirk's new book that's coming out is called, I just found it, it's called Stop in the Name of Love, Why Honoring the Sabbath Will Transform Your Life. I think people are paying attention to these areas in which they need, we need to do some tinkering to get back to really honoring God. And, people have a longing and a desire for that. So, I can see a real trend happening in that respect where I think feels like there's some momentum moving in the right direction on this one for sure.
Yeah, I think too, and you're the expert, but don't you think the left is having a meltdown, like the biggest meltdown I've seen in a long time?
They are. Yeah. No, it's really, there's a real scrambling going on. And, we hope that it's a real reckoning. I know I've been hearing story after story about people saying, I realized I was wrong on this, and then that made me question everything else. And I think it's like that. It's sort of you pull one thread and you start realizing, like, well, if that's not true, then this might not be true. And that's really where the trans movement, I think, has, it just overplayed its hand. There's the ick factor and there's the violence factor. And this is where, Satan just went too far and people are waking up. So I think it's really encouraging.
Yeah. Because you have not only obviously the spiritual and the psychological things going on. I mean, it's hugely demonic. But then when you have you're messing with the body, as you mentioned, you can't do that to a person's body and put them on all kinds of different medications and expect them to be acting normally, right?
Yeah. No, well, and this is what we've seen with womanhood. I mean, it goes back to the Blessed Mother and this destruction of what a mother is. I mean, Phil Browder talks about, she couldn't talk about when she worked at Cosmo, virgins.
Oh, I love
mothers.
her. She's great.
Isn't she the best?
Yep.
But who is the Blessed Mother? She's a virgin mother. And so I think that this idea of how do we, first of all, take away motherhood, how do we take away virginity, but then how do we take away women's fertility? And then finally, how do we take away the marks of the body that define a woman? All of this has been in the works for a very, very long time. And I think we're just finally at the point where people have realized, like, this is not working. This is not good.
Yeah, but it's so biblical, as you said. I mean, we know from the beginning that Satan hates women because of, who? The Blessed Mother, right? Exactly.
Exactly right. Yep, exactly right.
Carrie, thank you. Thank you for this article. Thank you for all your great work. And when's your new book coming out?
It comes out in January. Something Wicked.
Great.
So we'll have to get a copy to you.
Yes, and you'll have to come back on, promise.
I love it. So
all right.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for this article. It just reminds us to keep, it just takes us back to the center. Okay, look at Jesus.
Yeah.
Just look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at him.
It's that simple, huh?
He's God. And we are not. That's what we have to remember. Carrie, thanks so much. God
My
bless
pleasure.
you. The article is 7 ways to increase your devotion to the holy face of Jesus. All things Christ, as my spiritual director says. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for tuning in to Catholic Connection today on a Wednesday. First hour, of course, on EWTN Radio. Second hour, EWTN Radio Extra. More information can be found at EWTN.com. And remember, never forget to look upon the face of Christ. And all things Christ, as my spiritual director says, at the name of Jesus, right? It is really important, the sacramentals that Mother Angelica talks about. And I'll tell you what, under my pillow, this is a little personal story. I talk about this actually in one of my books, Listening for God. When I was a little girl, my communion gift that I chose was not something really girly, which is odd for me because I love my bling. You know, when you're kids and you can go and you can get the Mother of Pearl communion books and the pretty lace gloves and the white Mother of Pearl, the faux Mother of Pearl rosaries. I chose this statue of Jesus holding a chalice, and on the bottom, 2 angels, and it says Pani Angelicus. And I have one that is back in our house in suburban Detroit, and I went online and found the same statue a couple of years ago, and I have one now under my pillow in Italy. And that is something that I sleep with every night. I look at it. I keep it near me to remind me of Jesus and when I made my first Holy Communion and everything that God has seen me and my husband through over the last, thanks be to God, 42 years of marriage. So those images, we're not worshiping them. They remind us of the Lord. They remind us of our faith. These beautiful images of the Blessed Mother and the saints, they are part of our family. Just like you have a picture of maybe your great-grandparents somewhere or your mom or your dad. They're part of the family. Never forget that. Tomorrow, our family conversation continues with our very own Father Mitch Pacwa and our friends from Guadalupe Radio about the GRN Academy. Talk to you then.